that I represent need that money. They don't, they could do without it maybe. It's not necessarily that they need it, but now that it's coming, I think it can come in handy. I think they'll spend it locally. I think they'll certainly have some impact on the local economy. If enough people get this rebate. In a year from now, or less than a year from now in January, this rebate will be approximately, depending on how much money you earn, it could be as much as $1,000 or 8 to 100,000, or 1,000 is usually the figure I hear mostly.
Order. I think we reached the hour of adjournment for the hour for the late debate. I thank the member. You'll have 17 minutes left when we get back to Committee of the Whole at 6:30.
Order, please. We've reached the moment of interruption. The topic for tonight's discussion is a resolution submitted by the MLA for Richmond. Be it resolved that rural roads are still being neglected by this government. The member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a privilege to rise in this House tonight to speak on late debate on a topic that is of vital importance to the constituents that I represent in the county of Richmond. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that having had the opportunity with this House sitting, one only really has weekends to spend in the constituency and during the week returning some phone calls, but clearly the message that is coming from the residents of Richmond County is that they are, disgusted, I guess you could say, and saddened to see the state of the roads in Richmond County after 4 years of Tory rule in this province. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that having travelled throughout the constituency, this is a problem that has been encountered not only in one or two communities, but from one end of the constituency to the other. Mr. Speaker, I will speak a little later about the previous government and its actions in Richmond County, but let me speak today of the situation we find ourselves in right now. Mr. Speaker, I've had residents contact me asking for the Department of Transportation info line where they can call to report damage to their vehicle due to the amount of damage being sustained by residents in Richmond County. Mr. Speaker, seniors are now saying that they are hesitant to take their vehicle to go out, either whether it be to the drugstore, whether it be for grocery shopping, or whether it even be for a little outing where they can go for a drive and spend the day visiting different communities because they fear incurring damage to their vehicle, which they clearly, when they're on fixed incomes, are not in position to continue to pay such costs when one considers that the government has sat back and allowed insurance costs to go up and the cost of gas to go up without taking any action. So, Mr. Speaker, I've had a number of seniors who've come back to me and said, we remember the days when there used to be gravel roads. There used to be horse and buggy. And they said, unless something is done to improve these roads, we should return back to the gravel roads, because at least the gravel roads, they could be graded and it was a little easier to maintain them than what we have here today. Now, Mr. Speaker, what a shameful thing to hear. Seniors who've worked all their lives, who've grown this economy, who are now in their golden years, that can look back and be proud on what they've done for their own families, what they've done for our communities, now saying that they long for a return to the gravel roads with the horse and buggy because of the neglect taking place for the roads throughout Richmond County. Now, Mr. Speaker, as you're well aware, the residents of Richmond County, like the residents throughout this province, are taxpayers. They pay the tax on gas. They pay the tax on home heating oil. They pay the high cost of renewing their driver's license. They pay the high cost of renewing the registration on their vehicles. And yet, what do they get in return is what they are asking. Now, Speaker, one could ask, well, what were the expectations of the people of Richmond County after the 1999 election? Well, first of all, it was this Premier, John Ham, in his Blue Book that says, he said in that if elected, a John Ham government will take the revenue raised from license registration, vehicle registration, fuel tax, home heating oil tax, and will take all of that money and put it towards road construction and road maintenance. So that's what the Premier promised, Mr. Speaker. So that's not the people of Richmond County that are just imagining this. This was a fundamental commitment made to the people of this province that if a John Ham government was elected, this is what they would deliver. I know many of the Tory members over on the other side, when they went to the doorstep, used this during their campaign, saying, elect us, and this is what will happen, and we will fix the roads throughout the province. So, Mr. Speaker, it is they who created these expectations. Yet at the end of the day, when we look at the amount of road work which has taken place in the last 4 years in Richmond County, that clearly has not happened. Now, Mr. Speaker, there has been some work done on the Route 4 going through Richmond County, that being the highway. There's been some work done, for example, some resurfacing between the Port Hawkesbury town limits and the community of St. Peter's along the number 4. Different patches of that, there has been some work done. I will recognize that. And that was important work to be done, especially for our tourist industry and that. Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the other areas where some work was done last summer was on route number 4. In fact, that would be route number 4 going from St. Peter's heading down towards Sydney. Now, Speaker, you would know yourself, having traveled that road, that road is still in need of significant upgrades. But the point of the resolution here today, we hear this government talk about Highway 101, we hear them talk about different highways around this province, and those are all very important. But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, the residents of Nova Scotia who live on rural roads, they too have a right to have a decent road when they pull out of their driveway and they have to get to the highway. They should have a reasonable road and expect a safe, reasonable road to get to these highways or to get to their place of work or to get to the drugstore, get to the grocery store, or to go visit family. And that is where the government has failed. Now, Mr. Speaker, they will come and they will say, and I'm sure whoever's responding for the government will talk about the RIM program. The RIM program was a realignment of money, where the government said, well, let's create a new program and try to convince Nova Scotians that we've put all this more money into transportation and all the wonderful things we're doing. Mr. Speaker, the RIM program is important, and it has provided some work in Richmond County. I will acknowledge that, not as much as we'd like, but I know it's done some work. But what is the nature of the work that's been done? For the most part, it's been ditching, it's been culvert replacement, and it's been graveling, and it's been grading. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's on gravel roads. It's not on paved roads. And that is important work. There has been work done in the community of Lardwez, a significant amount of work. A lot of work done in the communities around the Loch Lomond area, where there is a number of gravel roads. But, Mr. Speaker, we are fortunate in Richmond that we have a significant amount of paved roads. And the RIM program has not addressed these roads. These roads have been left in neglect. And if I can take you quickly, Mr. Speaker, in the short amount of time I have, when one looks at the low road in Arishat, High Road in Arishat, which is the main center of commerce for Ilmadam, well, it is now to the point that people no longer want to walk along these roads, and they won't allow their children to drive their bikes along these roads. And you ask, well, why? Because cars are swerving over the yellow line, they are driving on the shoulder, they are going all over the place, Mr. Speaker, to try to avoid the potholes, making it a very dangerous stretch of highway. Mr. Speaker, I can take you, if you continue going, some of the smaller roads we have that we've tried to get the government to address, most of them under 1 kilometer or maybe a little bit more. Some of them are even single lane roads, whether it be the Gronet Road, whether it be the Cape Rouge Road over in Alderney Point, whether it be the Sampson's Cove Road and some of the side roads in Little Lance. And Mr. Speaker, I can take you when we go through the Rocky Bay Road leading from Rocky Bay to Poirieville. That road, Mr. Speaker, I've spoken before in this House. It is to the point now that during the summer we've asked the Minister of Transportation, if he won't send us asphalt, at least send us a lawnmower, because that road is in such a condition that the grass is growing in the middle of the road due to the cracks in the pave. And that's what the residents have asked. Well, at least if you won't send us paved, send us a lawnmower. Mr. Speaker, is that what John Ham promised the people of Richmond County and the people of Nova Scotia in 1999? Mr. Speaker, if we leave the Ilmadam area, and then we go in the community of Louisdale, Benny's Lane, again, a smaller strip of road is not very long, is in deplorable condition. Residents don't even want to walk along the road because of the potholes and because of the problems with the shoulder and pavement breaking. They are afraid that they will cause themselves damage. The road in Louisdale, going from the post office up to Grand Anse, is another road which needs to be addressed. There are a few of the side roads there also. They're not big roads, but they should be resurfaced, Mr. Speaker. Then, If we go down to the community of Whiteside, Mr. Speaker, this is one of the areas that stands to see a tremendous growth in residential development with the continued growth of the Point Upper Industrial Park and with the Strait area. Yet that road is something that was built many years ago not to sustain the amount of traffic there now. Mr. Speaker, my time's short, but if you look at the roads throughout the community of Evanston, then if you go through Cleveland, again, the roads leading up to Dundee Resort, a beautiful golf course, something we want tourists to visit, that road is in terrible condition. If you continue going around Dundee and you loop all around through Roberta, the Points, bringing you back to St. Peter's, that road, there are a number of different residential developments taking place there, and the road is just not built to sustain that amount of increased residential development. Mr. Speaker, you can continue, as I said, along route number 4. The other big road I should mention, the highway we'd like to see addressed, is Route 4 from Grand Anse to River Tillard, which goes through the community of River Bourgeois, something that has been promised, something that the district office has said is their #1 priority. We hope to see that pavement taking place this summer. I know that the President of the Tory Association has joked out loud about that being done. It should not be a joke, Mr. Speaker. It should be a commitment. The people there have waited long enough. They paid their taxes. They should see that. But at the end of the day, this government made a commitment. It hasn't held up to that commitment, and the people of Richmond County expect their roads to be in the same status as the roads in any other Tory ridings or anywhere else in this province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize. Yes, I wasn't looking. I apologize. The MLA for Eastern Shore. I'll get it. Eastern Shore.
Not a long name, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is a pleasure to stand tonight to address this resolution. I'd like to probably advise the member across the way that I also am a rural representative, and I represent one of the largest rural ridings in Nova Scotia. Not the largest, but I believe, Mr. Speaker, the 3rd largest. And I also can tell you that we have problems with roads on the Eastern Shore, far down as Ecum-Secum. We have problems with the roads in Clam Bay. We have problems with the roads in Porter's Lake. We also have issues with subdivisions. We also had problems with roads in Chesuncook and still experience a spot here and there. But I want to tell you the resolution reads that the province is neglecting rural roads. I should say the resolution should read that the province is working on neglected roads of the past. And I can tell you, as not only being a resident, but being a lifelong resident, a member of the Eastern Shore, that in my time, I've never experienced so much work as what's taking place now. Now, I'm not going to stand here. I'm not going to stand here and list each road, but I may speak about each road as I carry on. Now, I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, as you're aware, $63 million spent on highways in Nova Scotia in 1998-1999, $106 million on capital road and bridge projects in 2002. So there's certainly a difference there, plus $159 million in operating cost. Mr. Speaker, we said all of Nova Scotia is rural. A member across the way says that's not on rural roads. Well, I don't know if you go out of the urban areas, what isn't rural in Nova Scotia? Richmond is very rural. You go to Hants East, it's very rural. And we have certain areas that are growing, but still under the care of the province. Matter of fact, in the riding of the Eastern Shore, probably one of the few ridings that would have a mix of rural and suburban or rural and core roads. And we would have the subdivision roads, which are under control and maintained by the HRM, and then we would have our province roads, our rural roads, looked after by the province. But I can't tell you, Mr. Speaker, I can't tell you how long it's been since such improvements have been made, not only to my riding. Of course, I'm going to be a bit parochial. It's my responsibility to represent the people of the Eastern Shore, and it's my responsibility to make sure that I work very hard in lobbying and bringing pavement. But I don't know, I could talk about, maybe we'll talk about the riding of Inverness, Marguerite Bridge that's been put in place down there. I want to tell you, maybe we should instead of calling it the Marguerite Harbor Bridge, maybe it should be called the McDonald Bridge. I don't know, because that member worked very hard to take that $10.4 million expenditure and put it in place, and it's under construction now. And we know that in the past, I don't think anybody would argue with this one, that was a very dangerous situation. Now we can talk about different bridges. Now I'm going to jump back to the Eastern Shore once again and talk about the Canterbury Bridge. What a long, tremendous battle that I fought to bring that bridge there for the people of Chesuncook and Porter's Lake area.
Yeah,
now it's in question. It's in question. Has he really lobbied for that bridge? Well, Mr. Speaker, I have. It's documented, and I want to tell you that on my desk here, if I'll pick it up, which I would table, we have the tender that was called and the tender that was issued, and hopefully by the end, as the tender states, by the end of May, that temporary bridge must be put in place. Now, every man and I can't get over it, Mr. Speaker. In 1993, a set of plans were drawn up for the Canterbury Bridge. In 1993, a set of plans were drawn up for the Canterbury Bridge and put in by the department, and all of a sudden, my gracious, I don't know what happened. The bridge never got fixed. Apparently, there wasn't a problem there. But the old MLA from the Eastern Shore, that was successful in winning the election in 1999, aggressively moved forward because I understood the importance of the Canterbury Bridge. Now, I want to tell you, I have proof right here. Now, you know what? When the bridge was removed, no one was responsible for the bridge. But when the tender was called, Mr. Speaker, I never seen the likes of it. They were coming out of the woodwork. I got the bridge. The temporary bridge will be put in place shortly. The tender is here. It's at the East Chesuncook base now. And I want to tell you, I'm not saying, Mr. Speaker, I'm not standing in my place and say I did not have, a battle. I did not have. There was an alternative route, and people could use another way around. But I want to tell you, I grabbed hold of that issue, and I worked with it. And I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, I've been successful for the good people of Chesuncook and Porter's Lake. There have been many issues surrounding that. But I'll never forget, once the tender was called, all the people that got that bridge, there were people making noise about that bridge. There were people, well, I told the member to do this, and I told him that. But in reality, you know, it's unbelievable. The MLA for the Eastern Shore was successful in getting that bridge. Now here, rural highways, the bridge is a part of the rural highways. McDonald Bridge down in Inverness is a part of the rural highways, and the work that's been taking place in the Richmond County is a part of the rural highways. Now, Hans East is just getting contract after contract. That's not a government riding. Some people will say, oh, the Conservative government they're being political. It's election time. Well, my gracious, Mr. Speaker, we are politicians. People on this side of the House and also people that are on that side of the House are politicians. It's the business of that side of the House to lobby the department for highways as well as it is the people on this side of the House. And I'll tell you, if you're not interested, Mr. Speaker, coming to this House and lobbying for highways for your riding, you might as well stay home. Because as much as we're accused as trying to buy votes, mind you, with asphalt, if we don't lobby for asphalt, it will soon defeat you. So I want to tell you, it's very real, very real. So that politician is doing his job and he's bringing pavement because it's election time. Well, I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, I work each and every day for the people of the Eastern Shore. I lobby every day for pavement on the Eastern Shore, and I'll lobby right up until the writ is called for the people of the Eastern Shore. That's my job. That's why they sent me here. That's why they sent me. Oh, now, where has everyone been this last 4 years? When the government was fighting this, the fiscal situation of the province, where were the people then? Well, I can stand in my place. 2 years ago, no one wanted Bill Dukes' job or the member from the Eastern Shore's job. But now that things are in place, now that the government has made some tough decisions and there's some money to spend for improvements in the province, well, my gracious, everybody wants the members from Eastern Shore's job. Everyone's saying, oh, bad member, he's not doing right, he doesn't stand up for us. Well, that's wrong. That's wrong, Mr. Speaker, because I want to tell you, it's very important for me. It's very important for me to continue to represent the people of Eastern Shore and to bring them asphalt to make improvements. Well, let's just run over. I know my time is short. What about the Clam Harbour Road? Oh, 4 years ago. 4 years ago. 4 years ago, when I was first elected, the Clam Harbor Road was in such bad repair that people couldn't get to Clam Harbor Beach. Okay, I talked to East Chesuncook Road. Well,
What a history there.
What a history there on the East Chesuncook Road. And I had a community meeting, and I asked the people, there's such a cost to fix your road. Maybe we could just simply pulverize it. Maybe we could work with the department and bring it to a certain level, and maybe we can rest on that until things in the rest of the riding can catch up to that point. And the people there were very successful. And today we have the East Chesuncook Road. The 207 in Lawrencetown has been done. Canterbury Bridge is on track. The 107 has been done. Oh, Mr. Speaker, I could go on and go on, but I'll tell you, it didn't come simply because the Minister of Highways wanted to favor the MLA and give them some pavement. No, I had to work with departmental people. I did so. I had to lobby and explain the importance of each and every road. But I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, we could talk about highways forever and ever. The point is the province is not neglecting the highways of Nova Scotia. The province is certainly starting to work and to make a difference on the roads of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. And I want to tell you, they're working on the roads that have been neglected. They're making a difference. They're paving roads so that the economy can grow and that tourism can flourish. We're working and paving our way to a better way of life in Nova Scotia. And I hope every MLA on both sides of the House are successful in getting pavement for their riding, because they are politicians. It is their job. It is their job to lobby departmental people. It is their job. It is their job to lobby the minister. And if you don't want to do that, stay home. Thank you.
The member for Hants East.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm really glad for an opportunity to speak on this resolution. And I want to tell the member for Eastern Shore that I have no problem doing my job. The people of Hants East deserve good representation, and I don't think I'm the one who should be saying that they've got it. I think that'll be up to them probably in a few months to make that decision. But I want to say that roads in a rural constituency are a big issue. They're a major issue. And I want to say that the roads in this province all need to be fixed. This is a situation whereby previous governments, both Liberal and Tory, haven't done enough for whatever reasons, but roads have been neglected. And actually, Mr. Speaker, I learned a few things traveling with my area manager, the operational supervisors that I have that work out of Milford and out of Knoll Shed. They're a couple of good gentlemen to work with. The area manager actually is an excellent individual. And one of the difficulties I found in my job is that this is the third area manager that I've been dealing with since 1998. In both the depots or the sheds in Knoll and Milford, I think I'm on the third operational supervisor in each of those sheds, maybe the fourth. And to get any kind of continuity has been very difficult. Matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, you might get one engineer to say, look, okay, well, we can't do that for you this year, but we'll mark that down for next year. Well, next year, the area manager changes. So you're right back to square one, trying to make the same case. But I have been fortunate. I have not been completely shut out by this Tory government. In 1998, there was a road, the 354, or what's called the Kennecook Woods, was on the slate to be done. After that 1998 election, when a new Democrat was elected in Hants East, that came off the slate by the Liberals. It didn't get done. They did continue to complete the South Rawdon Road, and I really appreciate it that they did that. But it wasn't until after 1999. Of course, 1999 was kind of a wash because of the late date of the election. But certainly after that, 2000, I started to be able to get some roads done. Now, and I appreciate I appreciate everything that I've been able to get from the Tory government, or that the people of Hants East have been able to get. I know they appreciate it. And there are real problems, I think, in the history of how we used to do roads. I'm thinking that some of the patronage has come out of road building and maintenance. I know. And I want to say that one of the things I find most frustrating is when you travel over roads that are in very bad shape, and you get the story as to the standards that were set, or the criteria that were set by the department on what they wanted done on this road in terms of the tests for the gravel, et cetera, that had to come out of the pit, then you find out that for the sake of a phone call, that contract was changed because somebody knew somebody, and we all pay the price. We all pay the price for that. The taxpayers in Hants East are paying the price for roads that were never actually built up to the standard they should have been, and they deteriorate. And that was probably done quite often during election time, but it wasn't done well. It wasn't done right. And I want to say that if there's one road that has frustrated me in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, it's been the Bar Settlement Road. As hard as I've tried to bring that up to some kind of a decent standard, it's been very difficult. I do have a commitment to get something done this year, and that commitment was given to me last year. But anyway, they're sticking by it, and they are going to do some work. Not enough, but a start. Mr. Speaker, one thing our party has asked for and would love to see either any government do it is a priority list. I find that my constituents are quite reasonable. Matter of fact, I'm amazed at how reasonable they are. People would say to me, I wouldn't do your job for love or money, thinking that I would be abused all the time. But I find that the people I represent don't ask for more than they deserve. Sometimes I think they don't ask for as much as they deserve. But when it comes to these roads, they deserve to be treated better. And when I think about if I could go to those people and say, look, your road isn't the worst road this year, but if we can get roads A, B, and C out of the way, your road will be the next road. If I could say, your road will be taken care of, it'll be repaved in 3 years or 4 years, people would buy that. If they knew exactly where on the list their road was going to be, and they could anticipate that that road would be done by such a date, and it actually would happen, that would be a great selling point for any politician, as long as the politicians could stick to it. It costs about $100,000 to pave a kilometer of road, and one thing that the government has done, and I don't know which one, whether it was under the Tories or under the Liberals, but they got rid of their pavement plant. So we have no paving plant. So the province used to make its own pavement, and it could deliver that and pave roads quite reasonably. Now, they always put some of that out to tender so that the private sector could make some money. And the honourable member from Richmond who mentioned the RIM money, this is another step in trying to offer more dollars to the private sector. And for me, it's only worked out to be complaints. Just about everything that's been done under the RIM money has actually, the people on the road complained about how the work was done. We're so cut in staff that we don't have any supervisors to supervise the jobs when they're done. And then the department has to go and fix them afterwards. And I can't see that actually has been in the benefit to anybody. One thing I want to mention, and that's the Glues Cap Trail in my constituency. And if there's any areas that I think I would recommend to the government to pay attention to, it's the tourist routes. Spend some money on the tourist routes. It'll pay dividends. And from Maitland to Walton on the 215 is part of the Glues Cap Trail. The 215 in my constituency has 4 river rafting companies, Maitland Heritage District, Burncoat Head, highest tides in the world. And I want to tell members of this House that the highest tides in the world are measured at Burncoat Head in Hants East. They're not in New Brunswick, and they're not in Quebec. They're in Hants East, and in Nova Scotia. And they're not in Parsboro. Yeah, and they tend to drop after a while, too. So,
What comes in with the tide is the question.
so there's...
Order, please. Order, please. We were having a nice orderly debate. The member for Hands East has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's also Anthony Park, East Hants Historical Museum, Lawrence House. Actually, W.D. Lawrence was an MLA in this province. Built the largest sailing vessel in Canada there, actually just outside that house. We have Walton Lighthouse, the only remaining lighthouse in Hants East, which had 12,000 visitors last year, 12,000 visitors who bumped their cars over the 215. This is well worth the government, any government, to spend money on these tourist routes, because there are lots of attractions that people would come to Nova Scotia to see, and it would be to all of our benefit. And I think we can't forget what good roads in rural Nova Scotia mean, because the commerce in rural Nova Scotia, the wealth of that winds up usually in Halifax in one way or another to the benefit of the province. And if there's not good access for goods to travel in this province, then you're going to curtail the economy. And with those comments, I would say to members opposite and to the minister, I appreciate any help that I've been given by the government. I'll pursue you for more, and for my constituents as well. Thank you very much.
Order, please. The time for debate has expired. The Honourable Government House Leader. We just go right. Okay. Excuse me.
Order. Committee of the Whole House on Bills, Bill number 36, the Financial Measures Act, is resuming after the hour of adjournment for late debate. I recognize the member from Cape Breton, the Lakes. He has 17 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for acknowledging I have 17 minutes left. I'm going to move right back in the rural roads, Mr. Chair. I think it's important to note that at least the roads in my area that didn't get in the shape that they're in since 1999. I believe, it took many more years than that to come to the shape that they're in. But the government, as I was saying before adjournment, Mr. Chair, that rural Nova Scotia requires an infrastructure program to deal with the mess that the rural roads are in this province. And this infrastructure is vital in many areas of Nova Scotia, particularly in my area. Many economic possibilities, I believe, exist within the communities. And these communities are handicapped. They're, don't have all the tools that are available to them because of the state of the roads. In particularly, I can think of the Boysdale Route 223 is just one example where it could become a high tourist traffic area in many businesses. There's many projects that are planned there. It's a scenic drive. It's a magnificent area. Magnificent view of Bedore Lakes throughout that area. I mean, it has all the benefits of being a tourist, an area that could be enhanced to attract more tourism, particularly when we look at the Highland Village now is a museum. It's finally received that statue, and it's an important part of the rural way of life up in the Iona and Christmas Island, Boysdale area of my riding. And that facility is an important economic benefit to many people that live in that area because they obtain employment. Some of it is part-time and seasonal, of course, but it is a marked, a noted benefit to the community. And that facility, Mr. Chair, there's school project that's tied up now, since I don't know, every time we asked, we opened the newspaper. I think there's a delay in the construction of the school, but this school works part and parcel with it's an important part of the community infrastructure in that area, and we have to get that school, that facility constructed so that the community can begin to receive the benefits that this facility could bring, because they work in partnership with a lot of programs and with the Highland Village and the other facilities in that community. It's a community that works good together, and they're committed to their community prosperity, and they must be provided with the tools that are necessary to see this prosperity come to the level where community members are confident that they can bring it to. But they need an infrastructure program and a road program, repairs, a highway constructed through that community in order for these economic benefits to become a reality. And when I look at this government, I have to recognize that they are, in fact, putting more money into road construction in this province. And hopefully, I'm going to be able to convince the Minister of Tourism and the Minister of Economic Development and the Minister of Transportation to review the roads in that area and to recognize the importance that this road infrastructure could be for that particular part of my constituency, because there are many possibilities, and I believe that the two honourable ministers from Cape Breton are adjacent to the riding, and the member from Inverness visits there, quite regular. I know that because, he's a popular magician. He's a fiddle player, and he gets to visit community halls, and in fact, his name is raised quite often by the older folk in the community because he is such a good fiddle player, and we're not going to comment on his abilities as a politician. We'll leave that up to the good people in Inverness. But I do recognize the fact he's a good fiddle player, and of course he's well known throughout that area. So hopefully he can help me, convince the Minister of Transportation that rural road construction, at least in that area, Cape Breton, the Lakes, can be an economic benefit, as it can be, Mr. Chair, in other areas of my riding. There's all kinds of ability for this government to enhance economic prosperities, particularly in rural areas, if they follow through in this what they say is a plan that's going to deal with the rural road issue in Nova Scotia. So I'm hopeful that it's not going to be just government-held ridings, and it's going to be include opposition ridings, because, Mr. Chair, that is one problem I feel my constituency has always left at a handicap. It seems that, whenever we have a member, he or she sits in the opposition benches. And in 97, we elected an NDP member, Mr. Chair, that unfortunately was in opposition, and the government didn't do anything about roads in my area at that time. Very little, and in fact, I have to give the former Premier, Russell McClellan, some credit and benefit, Mr. Chair, because he visited the areas personally with myself, and there was some road work done because he recognized the need to have this infrastructure completed. So, Mr. Chair, before that, it was, again, the opposition that have I believe I added it up one day. I think at 24 years, I think the riding was in opposition 17 years. And for the 8 years that we did have government representation, it's basically only about 3 of those years that any road paving or any major repairs occurred throughout my constituency. And, this is a major disadvantage today because the roads are crumbling throughout my riding. It's every single road you go on, it's devastating. and it's devastating to the people I represent because higher repair bills are necessary on motor vehicles. You know, you see brand new vehicles alongside the road with the tire rod ends hanging off, or the rims bent because they hit a pothole, that are bigger in size. They look like manholes that you see with there's crop pits in my riding on streets that are considered potholes, Mr. Chairman. They're as big as crop pit openings, and they look similar to a manhole here in downtown Halifax. If in fact the cover was left off a manhole, that's what it would look like. And sometimes if we're lucky, we get Department of Transportation to go out and circle it with orange tape or orange paint so that motorists can see it before they run into it. But if you're driving and you see a dog or somebody walking in the road and you're paying attention to the safety issues and you just don't notice the paint, then bang. You know what happens, Mr. Chair. And this, is not uncommon throughout my constituency, and I am, I don't have a problem saying it's common throughout Nova Scotia, because the roads I've been on here in the main lane are not much better. Although, I think it's important to recognize with the government members that the government has from the main lane. I think there is more black stuff being laid down here in the main lane, and one of the things I'm looking for from this government through this budget process is more fairness in the process when it comes to allotting paving projects, and hopefully it's not just going to be government-held ridings. It must be a nonpartisan process that the Premier promised. And I think we have a minister over there that's really showing that he's taken control of his constituent or his department. In that when we look at the 101 and the 103 issues, the minister is dealing with those issues. And now, as I indicated before, he's in partnership with the federal minister, and they're getting roads fixed in that particular section of the province. Then hopefully it'll free up more attention and money to areas like Cape Breton that require road improvements, and particularly in an area where we like to boast about the economic advantages that Cape Breton has in regard to tourism and the facilities that we have, such as Lewisburg and the Cabot Trail. These are magnificent facilities, Mr. Chair, but we need roads. We need an infrastructure program, and it's so simple that the access road to and from the Highland, the Cape Breton Highlands National Park. This is a national park, Mr. Chair. Why isn't the federal government involved in the development and the maintenance of these access roads to and from this park? It also leads to a magnificent trail. The Cabot Trail is world-renowned. I mean, what national government would not want to be involved in the development of that highway? Like really. And it's time for the government to recognize, this minister to recognize, and begin negotiating with the federal government to have this road network included in even if they could call it a pilot project, Mr. Chair. This could be a pilot project for other areas in Canada that the federal and provincial government could work together on, and the province would save money on the maintenance and the construction of this highway system. Not only the construction, Mr. Chair, which is very important, but the maintenance of that highway would be very minimal, because the federal government on these 100 series highways, they pay approximately 70% of the cost of the construction, the new construction, as well as the maintenance. This, Mr. Chair, would free up other monies that could be readily available to other streets in my constituency or neighboring constituencies on Cape Breton, or in fact, it could be spent on streets in mainline rural Nova Scotia, as we all are aware, and those of us over here on the opposition benches want to recognize the fact that, yes, roads on the mainland need attention as well, and they need money. So this money could come in handy to this government, and it would spur other economic development in that area. I'm certain of it, Mr. Chair, particularly when you listen to business when they're looking to locate in a village or a community, particularly in rural Nova Scotia, that the highway network is their priority concern. Whether that they can get goods and services and transfer them 12 months of the year in and out, or, you know, it's a major issue, particularly in the Ingonish area, my neighbouring riding of Victoria, the Boysdale, Christmas Island area. I can talk about the Georges River area, Mr. Chair, my riding. I can talk about Upper Leaches Creek and the opportunities up there. The road has crumbled up there, The Upper Leaches Creek Road is probably in that type of despair, or that you know, it's almost at the point where the remaining pavement is going to have to be scraped off the road if the provincial government doesn't allow local authorities to some funding and the tools to provide the attention that's necessary in that street. Now again, Mr. Chair, it's not fair to blame this government for the despair in this road or the shape of the road. I'm not suggesting that, but it is the responsibility of this government to put a program in place with real dollars in it that will deal with issues in streets like this throughout Nova Scotia, not just in my riding, Mr. Chair. And why I supported this budget is that I see the beginning of this, Mr. Chair. I see this government putting $50 to $60 million on top of the approximately $112 million they already spend into the budget in regard to road improvements in this province. That's a beginning. It's an improvement, and that's one reason why I supported the budget, and why I'm hopeful that the opposition members will, you know, slow down the debate here and allow the government to proceed and pass this budget and get this money spent in the communities where it's required. The debate over this budget or the other issues that are about to face Nova Scotians can be dealt with during the election process. And that, Mr. Chair, as all indications are, is very near. And it's one that perhaps that, you know, maybe it's time that we begin to recognize, I guess, the fact that this government does have, it's a majority government, it does have the right, according to what the people voted in 1999, to proceed as they have since then. And they will answer to the people of Nova Scotia on the next election day, and it will be either that government will be re-elected, or one of the opposition parties will be taking over power on that side of the House. And Mr. Chair, I hope to be here. Back here as an independent member of this House, representing the constituency, the new riding of Victoria Lakes. And I intend to continue to rise on my feet, as I have today and other days, to bring the concerns of the people that I represent to the floor of this House. Mr. Chair, with that, I believe I've done that today. I will continue to do that tomorrow. And I know my time is about exhausted. I want to say thank you and good evening.
Thank you. I recognize the member from Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always interesting to follow an independent member. Let's not go back and revisit history and some of the things that when he was a member of that third party. Let's look at the process that we're going through here today. And for those people who are tuned in or in our gallery watching, we are debating Bill 36, which is the Financial Measures Act. And the Financial Measures Act has been over to law amendments. And I hope members opposite who are a part of that important committee and a part of that process in this historic legislature have understood what has happened when we have been over in law amendments. And to make sure that members are aware of this, I'm going to bring to the members' attention a few comments that I heard in law amendments. I'm also going to, as I usually do, try to point out a particular piece of legislation And does it pass the litmus test? The litmus test for me is the doorsteps of the constituency of Timberley Prospect. That's, after all, the crucial thing for this MLA. Does this piece of legislation pass the litmus test of approval of the doorsteps of people who live in my growing constituency of Timberley Prospect? I want you to know that I had the opportunity for the past 5 years to be a caucus seatmate of the member from Dartmouth North. And the member from Dartmouth North stood in his place the other day, and as he passionately does, he spoke about his concerns for his constituency. During his presentation, the member from Dartmouth North again used a statistic that I think we should look very, very seriously at. And as a school principal in a previous career, I can tell you, Mr. Chair, that when I hear the member from Dartmouth North say that there are 30,000 children living in poverty in this province, but the member from Dartmouth North went further, and he began to compare the size of that 30,000 figure, just another number, another statistic that gets burped out on the morning pages of our daily newspapers. That 30,000, let's put it in the size of a Truro or a Bridgewater. Well, let's look at the size of some of the towns of this province and say that we have a whole town of 30,000 young people that are living in poverty. They're going to school with no breakfast, Mr. Chair. They have no way of even going to the cafeteria for lunch. And in many cases, Mr. Chair, through no fault of their own or no fault of their parents, they are living in poverty. Now, for members present, they're saying, well, we've heard the member from Dartmouth North, but were we actually listening to the member from Dartmouth North? Because as he pointed out in his comments, that there are approximately 438,000 Nova Scotians that are going to receive this infamous $155 check. So we have 430,000+ Nova Scotians going to receive this check, but there are 300,000 other Nova Scotians that will not be eligible. And I want you to know from the little canvassing I've done over the past weekend, Mr. Chair, and you know what a terrible Saturday it was, but it was a good day to go to the government wharf. It was a good day to knock on a few doors in Lower Prospect. And I want you to know that the message from the people that live in those communities that I was fortunate enough to get to on Saturday afternoon was simply this. Take that $155 and use it in ways that we can see in our community. That's, after all, the litmus test, Mr. Chair, which I bring to your attention today. Take that $155 and give proper windows to the new renovated Sir John A. Macdonald Library. Take that $155 and use that money so that we can have the Macdonald Lake subdivision brought up to scratch and we won't get school buses stuck on it. Take that $155 and let's deal with some of the curriculum changes that have happened in classrooms across this province. Curriculum changes that sound so good, but when the dollars are not there to support the curriculum changes, frustration quickly sets in. Mr. Chair, I had the opportunity at Law Amendments to have the privilege, and I could say the honor, of listening to some of my past students. And in particular, and I remember how well during Bill 68, we sat and listened to one speaker after another, healthcare workers, nurses, people concerned about the system. And during those long hours, Mr. Chair, as I know you are aware because you sat in that committee with me, we heard from numerous students that I have had in the public school system. So it's with compliments that I turn to people such as Cheryl Joyce, who came in front of Law Amendments and very nervously at first made her points, because Cheryl is one of those outstanding young men and women that I have taught. Cheryl's one of those young teachers, or one of those young students that this teacher had who made a presentation on behalf of the RRSS workers. And Mr. Chair, anybody who's a member of Law Amendments has to, aside from the political stripe, admit that we heard some very, very emotional comments coming forward from those workers. The concern that we hear is the $155 could be used so much better. I, in particular, would like to point out to members opposite the presentation that Dawn Gillis made in front of law amendments. And she wrote in her presentation, and if it's necessary, Mr. Chair, I can table this. This is not only a fight for wage parity, but a fight for respect. The employees of the RRS have a history of being underpaid and undervalued. They want to be treated in a fair manner. They want to be treated so that they feel that they have been listened to, Mr. Chair. And I can bring other examples forward for your attention, but the key matter is that when a member of the public takes his or her time to appear in front of law amendments, the courtesy of being able to ask a few questions, to engage that Nova Scotian who has appeared, and for us, I know, Mr. Chair, when we were first sworn in, and I have been in this legislature before and taking students on tours, but when you first come into that red room and you have the opportunity to sit there and look around, you realize this place oozes and breathes history. We can't take that for granted, Mr. Chair, but when an average Nova Scotian, if I can call Cheryl Joyce an average Nova Scotian, she certainly was not an average student, she was an extraordinary student, Mr. Chair, but when Nova Scotians take the time to appear in front of law amendments in that historic red chamber, out of courtesy, it is extremely important, Mr. Chair, that we have the opportunity to engage those witnesses, to ask a question, to make them feel welcome. That's, after all, what we have to do much more of as legislators. We have to listen to Nova Scotians about their concerns. And, Mr. Chair, there was an interesting presentation of which I have received a copy, and my friend from Cape Breton Centre gave me a copy of this. And I thought maybe the member from Glace Bay would be interested when he knows that the Councillor Vince Hall made a presentation at Law Amendments. I don't know if the current member from Glace Bay is interested in what Mr. Hall had to say, but Vince Hall had some very important remarks, and they focused on the fact that the public is aware that the Nova Scotia Occupational Health and Safety Act has high priority in Nova Scotia. And as you probably know, Mr. Chair, Mr. Hall is a councillor in the CBRM, and he points out very clearly when it comes to dangerous workplaces that one of the more dangerous places for people to work, and I'll be coming to a further reference to this in a moment, but Mr. Hall points out that one of the concerns that he has with this piece of legislation is that at the casino, because of a special provision and a special clause, and we've heard the member from Argyle go along with the apologies, if I can say that, the excuses for this piece of flawed legislation. But Mr. Hall points out, and I'll table this too in a moment, he writes, and he said, in summary, I believe the government of Nova Scotia has an obligation to ensure a level playing field for all business in Nova Scotia. It would be a shame if Bill 36, including subclause 14, becomes law, as it would perpetuate lost jobs and create another monopoly in Nova Scotia, thereby creating more revenue in the provincial government at the expense of small businesses in rural Nova Scotia. And I hope the member from Glace Bay, the current member from Glace Bay, because as you probably know, Mr. Chair, that Mr. Hall will soon be hopefully successfully nominated for the NDP. Mr. Hall is looking forward to having the opportunity to serve with this party in this House, and I would hope that all members of this legislature had the opportunity to review the submissions that were made at law amendments, to listen to the presentations. But Mr. Chair, I want to be clear on something that does disturb me about the law amendments process, and that is the fact that when we go to law amendments, the opposition members traditionally ask the only questions. Now, I want you to know that today at law amendments, I saw a bit of a change in that, because to the chair's credit, the chair engaged some witnesses with some questions, and that's a positive step. So what I would like to see is the members of the government caucus follow their chair's example, follow the Minister of Justice, the Attorney General's example, and as the chair of law amendments, have the opportunity to follow what the member from Truro Bible Hill has been doing and asking questions of the witnesses. That would only be courteous, to take the time to make these Nova Scotians feel welcome as they come into our historic legislature, as they come into the historic Red Room, where they have the opportunity to speak to us, where we can ask them a question about their particular presentation. That's out of courtesy, that's out of respect, and I look forward to continuing to serve on law amendments because it's a perfect opportunity for government members of the opposition to make sure that they have the opportunity to listen to Nova Scotians. Now, Mr. Chair, probably one of the most important presentations that took place at Law Amendments, and the Law Amendments procedure is of some importance because it's that opportunity for Nova Scotians to come into this historic House and to have the opportunity to speak to the legislators that have been debating during the first part of the bill being passed, where we will have to listen to Nova Scotians to what they say about a particular piece of legislation. And Bill 36, as you probably recall, Mr. Chair, it certainly did have a number of presenters. I know that you and other members of this caucus went late into the night, as I think we were up to almost 40 presenters. So what should that message be? That message should be that there's a piece of legislation that Nova Scotians are concerned about, that particular bill is a concern to Nova Scotians. And in this case, Mr. Chair, of course, it's a real concern for the RRSS workers who've been unfortunately involved in this labor interruption. But I want to draw to the attention of the House that Andrea Skinner has had a presentation in front of Law Amendments, and she has also had published in the Speaker's Corner column in the Halifax Chronicle Herald her presentation. It's entitled, Mr. Chair, All Workers Need a Safe Workplace. And I would hope that members opposite, and I can for the page who wants to, it can come and table this. I would hope that members would look at that particular piece from the Herald, from the Chronicle Herald. And I just want to draw members opposite attention to what Ms. Skinner had to say. And as members are probably aware, Andrea is that young woman who worked, as in the past tense, at the casino here in Halifax. And of course, she has major issues with the smoke-free place legislation, in the fact, of course, that it does not involve the casino. And Andrea has a concern which she wants those members opposite to address. So this is what she says in conclusion, as she wraps up this well-written presentation, which she gave in front of Law Amendments. I would like to reiterate what is at the very heart of the issue. All employees have the right to a safe workplace. Now, Andrea Skinner has made her case, along with other people who came forward. And you know, I must say, Mr. Chair, I unfortunately missed a presentation that I want to draw attention to. And that was the presentation by Tim McDonald, the young teacher who made his presentation on behalf of his brother, Corey. Corey is employed at the casino, yet there are workers at the casino who are concerned about coming in front of Law Amendments because of particular repercussions. So there is another example of Bill 36 and how when we come to Law Amendments, it's an important process where we get to listen to ordinary, average Nova Scotians. Oh yes, Mr. Chair, as we are well aware, there are the lobby groups, if we're allowed to call them those terms. There are the union representatives. There are the special interest groups. But the average Nova Scotian who takes his or her time to arrive and come into this legislature, to get the visitor's pass, to sit patiently and wait at law amendments, and you, as you're sitting there, you take it for granted now. You know, I take it for granted, Mr. Chair, as I'm sitting there waiting for these presentations, but I looked at a young woman like Cheryl Joyce, and Cheryl Joyce, as you are aware, Mr. Chair, from my earlier comments, was a student. Cheryl actually was looking around at the ceiling. She was looking around at the surroundings. And as she said to me afterwards, well, as soon as, and she referred to, and I will not at this time, she referred to the member from Halifax Fairview by his name. She said as soon as that particular gentleman asked her a question, she relaxed. Now, Mr. Chair, that's why we have law amendments. That's why we're going through this process. That's why we have a piece of legislation, Bill 36, that seriously must be looked at. Now, the best example of looking at Bill 36 came forward today, because I attended a news conference downstairs in which I was presented a report card. And I know the Minister of Education has seen this report card, and it must be disappointing. Because, you know, the fact, of course, is that Bill 36 is expropriating, using money in a manner that is not meeting the needs of school children across this province. And I don't know if you've seen this report card, Mr. Chair, but I'm going to talk about for a minute about it, because I want you to know that report cards were always a big part of my life. I want you to know when I used to take them home to my father, I always presented to him first, because if I figured I could get it by him, well, my mom in many ways was a soft touch for her son. But if I took this report card home where it said punctuality, F, communication, F, leadership, I got a D, but the comment doesn't say much. But when it comes to behavior, I got another F. If I took that report card home, Mr. Chair, let me tell you, I don't know whether I would have the opportunity to speak to my mother later on with it, because that report card, and I will table it for you in a moment after I make reference to it, so you can just relax for a minute. But this is an important report card. Let's see the Minister of Education, because this, after all, is his department's response to a very emotional issue, and that is the Special Education Implementation Review Committee. Let's look, first of all, at communication. An F. Recommendation. Well, several others focus on communication. To date, we have had limited involvement or contact with the government, yet key decisions have been made regarding funding and communication. Now, Mr. Chair, that F says to me, that's not performance. That's not performance by this government, as these students in our school system are certainly receiving a short shrift. But let's look at punctuality. Now, Mr. Speaker, at least let's be aware of the fact that when students arrive on time and prepared to go to work, you can at least say to them, well, they'll get a passing grade. But let's look at this report. The Special Education Implementation Review Committee gives an F to the minister when it comes to punctuality. The report was submitted on time, that's by the review committee, in June of 2000. The response promised by the minister at the time was the MLA for Halifax Citadel. By November of 2001, the response finally arrived almost 2 years later, in April of 2003. Punctuality, that's not performance, that's an F. Leadership, well, the minister and his department gets a D. And this is what the comment is. While there have been improvements in this area, there is considerable room for more improvement. We feel that the government needs to better fund and support its own policy and legislation. It needs to better support and fund its own policy on legislation. A D. But let's look at behavior, because, you know, Mr. Chair, I can tell you as a school teacher that when it came to report cards, if you had a well-behaved student, a student who paid attention, a student who tried his or her best, well, you would always give them the benefit of the doubt, and if it came down to pass or fail, if all factors were equal, they received the magical pass. But here's the comment on behavior and the assessment of this government when it comes to properly funding the necessary curriculum changes for special education. Actions by governments have caused distress. Delay in responding to the Special Education Implementation Review Committee have meant budget considerations were missed. Lengthy responses to recommendations were misleading. For example, the response by government to recommendation 3 is over a page long, yet it offers no new funds or time for in-service. The behavior part of the report card is a dismal F. Now, Mr. Chair, that's a report card that no student in this province, that's a report card that no Minister of Education anywhere in this country should anyway be proud to display publicly. 3 Fs and a D. That would say to me, please return to class. You've lots more work to do. And why has that Special Education Implementation Review Committee been so harsh with this minister? They've been so harsh because they invested so many long hours, because they were involved in a process where they felt they were being listened to. Now, Mr. Chair, I want to speak about this issue, and I want to speak about it for a few moments. Because as you are well aware, in a previous career, I had the wonderful opportunity to teach, instruct, and be part of the education system with young people. And this party, and I hope all legislators, completely support the inclusion policy which this government is continuing to neglect. The underfunding because of the students that have been mainstreamed across this province has resulted in frustration, it's resulted in anger, it has resulted in distress. And today we had the opportunity to listen to a parent, Lorraine Colpitts. And I asked Ms. Colpitts if she could provide me with a copy of her comments, and she has done so, Mr. Chair. It's the only copy that I have, and I'll be asking the page to make copies if the page could when the opportune time comes. But this parent, who is part of the review committee, who has invested many long days and many long hours, has pointed out a number of things. And she begins with recommendation number 1. Recommendation number 1 calls for the development of a communication plan to improve the understanding of inclusive schooling. She goes on then to say the impact for families is that the information may not or may be easily understood or useful to them. Families may or may not have the tools they need to participate as full partners in the education of their children. Ms. Colpitts is a frustrated parent. She goes on to say that in the government response, they point out that 48 teachers participated in a summer institute and 27 participated in a leadership model in 2002 on the topic of inclusion of special education students in classrooms across this province. Ms. Colpitts quickly adds, this is only 75 out of the 10,000 teachers in Nova Scotia. Mr. Chair, if we are going to bring curriculum changes in, if we are going to mainstream children and we're going to have inclusion, we cannot allow the teachers, the parents, and I guess most importantly, I should reverse the order. We should not allow the students to be put in situations where the curriculum is not supported by well-trained teachers. The curriculum is not clear. The curriculum has to be supported by the professional development. And Mr. Chair, that costs money. That money has not been put in place. And parents are frustrated, teachers are upset, and most importantly, the young people who have been mainstream in the inclusion process, the correct inclusion process in this province, are distressed with what they see. Ms. Colpitts finishes her response by asking a number of rhetorical questions. And I'd like to read them into the record if I could, Mr. Chair. Ms. Colpitts writes, "What has been done to improve the current situation?" She also asks, "What difference will the current response make to the children and the teachers in classrooms across this province when they return to their schools in September?" And then she supplies, in her concluding paragraph, the answers. Unfortunately, the sad answers are, in Ms. Colpitts' words, this: there will be no significant and immediate improvement to an education system that lags behind all others in Nova Scotia. Ms. Colpitts' words, the frustrated parent: there will be no significant and an immediate improvements in the education system that lags behind all others in North America. Children and teachers will return to classes that are too large, and there will be no significant improvement in the resources available to support them. Teachers will not have the professional development opportunities to enable them to teach on an individual basis, to teach inclusively, to benefit all students. And Mr. Chair, as the page makes a copy of this, a number of copies, I would hope that members of the Liberal Party would be interested in reading Ms. Colpitts' comments. She says it all right there, Mr. Chair. She is frustrated and concerned about the fact that this government, through their financial measures bill, can take $155, and when the appropriate comes a number of days before the writ, then we will have a loss of funds that can be used to inclusion. I know there are many teachers, and I can bring their examples up here, and I know many of these teachers would say, keep that $155. Give me the curriculum support. Give me the assistance so that I can assist some of the students that are in my care. That in a class of 32, when I have 3 or 4 high-need students, I need the training, I need the curriculum so that I can make sure that these young people are having a meaningful education. At that same presentation, Mr. Chair, I had the opportunity to listen to Charmaine, and Charmaine made sure that I pronounced her name correctly. I would call it Bellefontaine, but Charlene calls it Bellefontaine. Charlene represents the Attention Deficit Association of Nova Scotia. She expresses in the comments that she made, and you know, it's interesting to notice who was at that presentation. I want you to know that the leader of the New Democratic Party was there. The leader of the third party was in attendance. But Mr. Chair, and I could be mistaken, although I know we're not allowed to draw attention to members who are absent here. I could be corrected if you think it's necessary, but there were no members of the government at that press conference. No members of the government there to listen to the Special Education Implementation Review Committee. They were not present. So that's why I'm taking a few moments this evening to bring this to their attention, whether it's Ms. Colpitts, whether it's Charmaine Bellefontaine or Bellefontaine. Ms. Bellefontaine writes, "I'm frustrated by the lack of knowledge on the part of the school staff. Our parents feel that teachers are in need of support and knowledge on proven teaching techniques and behavioral strategies for our children." Now, Mr. Chair, Ms. Bellefontaine, in her official position as a representative of the Attention Deficit Association of Nova Scotia, is dealing with an issue of some importance. And that, of course, is the major demands that are put upon school teachers across this province. Now, I'm not going to become an apologist for the frustrations of teachers, but let me tell you, Mr. Chair, things have changed since we were in the schools of this province. Things have changed drastically. I was made aware of the fact that when I began my teaching career, Mr. Chair, as you might be aware, I began my career at Dorchester Penitentiary, and I don't need comments from members opposite about that. I began my career at Dorchester Penitentiary, And when I had my students, Mr. Chair, I was a teacher and Dorchester at the time was maximum security. I had the opportunity, Mr. Chair, to get my students' files. And Mr. Chair, I went through and I looked at their background, I looked at their education, I looked at where they were from, and I also looked at their criminal record. But now, Mr. Chair, are you aware of the fact, and I ask this question without you having to answer it, but are you aware of the fact that a school principal can have a student transferred into his or her school, and he or she, as the teacher responsible in that school, the principal teacher, he or she could have a student in his or her school that has a criminal past, that has a criminal record. And believe it or not, Mr. Chair, you are not allowed to be informed of that. Now, Mr. Chair, that's wrong. That calls into, in my opinion, that calls into judgment, the professionalism of the teachers that are making the decisions. But that's where we are today, Mr. Chair. And I can tell you from personal experience that teachers are frustrated, they're upset, they're concerned because they don't have the resources at hand to be able to deal with the issues which they're facing. Now, Mr. Chair, I've heard the Minister of Education, aside from the fact that I haven't got his homework yet, and I'm still awaiting that homework that I assigned him during question period. You know, Mr. Chair, how many new teachers are we going to have in this province? Well, I want you to know, Mr. Chair, one of my past students, a graduate of the Bachelor of Education program at Mount St. Vincent, has just accepted a job on Prince Edward Island. She can't wait any longer. She's expecting a job, and she wanted to teach here in Nova Scotia. But she has quickly been snapped up, and good for her, she has a job in Prince Edward Island. To the credit of the school system there, they have made that decision. But, Mr. Chair, and I've attended the press conferences with the previous Minister of Education, I'm fully supportive of the number of reduced class sizes in primary and 1, but we must have to go much further, Mr. Chair. We have to go much further when it comes to class sizes, when it comes to the support of the school system, when it comes to making sure that the teachers who are responsible for the children across this province, that they have the training, the expertise, and the curriculum, Mr. Chair, the curriculum to be able to deal with the many challenges that we have in the school system these days. Mr. Chair, I want to turn to one more matter with the school system, and then I know members opposite perhaps would like me to move on to another topic because I know it strikes a nerve with them. I know it's a very testy topic when they hear their sons and daughters come home and say, and perhaps it's happened to you, Mr. Chair. It happened to me when my daughter was in the public school system. When she came home that first day and said, did you enjoy your classes? Yeah, good start. I'm looking forward to my teachers. My Canadian Lit class, has 42 students in it. 42 students in your Canada Lit class? 42 students. Now, they couldn't hold it in a regular class, and in fact, they held it in one of the bigger rooms in the school so that the 42 students could all fit into the class. But there are classes across this province, and that was 2 years ago, Mr. Chair, and that was at Sir John A. Macdonald High School. A staffing decision had to be made by the principal. These are students in grade 12. They're taking Canadian literature. So the teacher says to the principal, listen, I'll take them, because after all, we have to make sure that those students are in grade 10 math, perhaps. Those students who are in one of the classes where we should have smaller enrollments, we will have a situation where there could be as many as 40 students in a classroom. Those things are happening because teachers are being put in situations where, and I'm sure I see some of the young pages that are here tonight, they perhaps have been in high school classes of that size. Now, it's important for primary and 1, we understand, and the elementary school class sizes are of real consequence. But it's also important that we not forget our high schools. And let's look particularly at the issue of school maintenance. Now, school maintenance is in an absolutely emergency situation because, as we are well aware, our school boards have had to make some tough decisions To use the expression, Mr. Chair, I believe we could say they're robbing from Peter to pay Paul. If that's the expression that I can use, I would like to be able to use it in this manner. If a school board member or a principal is making a decision, he or she knows that the windows in room 233 are leaking. He or she knows that maybe I really am going to have a flooding problem with the runoff this spring when it comes to the fact that I, down by the cafeteria, have poor drainage. But do I want to put that request in? I don't want to put that request in if it takes away, Mr. Chair, from the fact that I might get another teacher. That I might, as the principal involved in trying to meet the curriculum needs of the students in my care, that I will get another teacher. And what has happened, Mr. Chair, is that school maintenance has been deferred for so long in some of our older schools that we have situations that are just downright embarrassing. Now, Mr. Chair, I've had the opportunity as the MLA for Timberley Prospect to visit other schools around this province. And it is a compliment to the maintenance staff. It is a compliment to the men and women who put the many long hours in to keep our schools clean, to keep them in as good a shape as possible. But I want you to know, from the schools that I've visited, and this does include a number of them, I will tell you that Barrington Passage Municipal School is one of the most decrepit schools that I have ever attended. There is a wing in that school, Mr. Chair, that literally has a wrap around it. One of those large orange, shall we call them ribbons? But it's not tied up in a pretty bow, Mr. Chair. It says, "Beware, keep out." Now, there are young people in the community around Barrington Passage. There's young people who walk by that every day because of the deferred maintenance decision that had to be made. Now, we've met some of those parents. Some of those parents have been here in our gallery. Some of those parents were fortunate enough to meet with the Minister of Education, and it's to the previous minister and to this minister's attention that this minister and the previous minister took the time to meet with the parents from Barrington Passage. But, Mr. Chair, the position isn't getting any better. Barrington Passage is an unhealthy school. It's an unhealthy school because of neglected decisions that the school board involved had to make, decisions which I'm sure they regret now, but decisions which eventually have just plain caught up to them. Now, Mr. Chair, I want to go from the Barrington municipal situation in that school to the school in my community. And I know that members opposite have heard me speak many times about Sir John A. Macdonald High School. Sir John A. Macdonald High School and its devoted staff and Principal Muriel Tupper have been through a number of changes over the last 2 years, Mr. Chair. If you remember the history, this is the school that previous March, suddenly was a school with no fixed address. And for March, April, May, and June, the young people that I am fortunate enough to represent in the community of Timberley Prospect attended Charles P. Allen High School in Bedford. Come the fall, the school with no fixed address was at Sackville High School. And for September through to Christmas and then through to this recent March, the students of Sackville High and the community of Sackville welcomed our students, made it available to them on a split shift arrangement. Mr. Chair, why was that? Because Sir John A.'s maintenance had been deferred for so long, because of environmental concerns that had been not addressed for so long. And I can speak from personal experience, Mr. Chair, because I want you to know I'm proud to say that the student council president of Sir John A. Macdonald High School in 1995, before she left to go to university for 4 years at Mount Allison in Sackville, New Brunswick, was none other than my daughter, Tricia Cameron Esterbrooks. And Tricia Esterbrooks wrote to the Minister of Education at the time, from the Liberal government at the time, and she wrote to the Minister of Education, she wrote to Mr. McEachran, she wrote to Mr. Harrison and said, "You've got to do something about my high school. I'm the president of the student council. It is unhealthy. There's a wing of the school that is closed. I question the safety of the water that we drink. I question the safety of the air that we breathe. That young woman, I'm proud to say, Tricia Estabrooks, has never, ever been surprised with the fact that Sir John A. Macdonald was finally closed. She currently works for CBC Radio in Nunavut. And when the news hit that Sir John A. had been closed, she sent me an email that night. Big deal, Dad. I told you so. Now, in 1995, I was not the MLA for Timberlea Prospect. But I can tell you that now that I am, Sir John A. Macdonald High School will be modernized. It will be improved. It will deliver a quality of service and a curriculum bar none, because there was a commitment made by this government, by that previous minister, and I will assure you, Mr. Chair, whether it's in this House, whether it's on the election campaign or on the doorsteps, Sir John A. Macdonald and the students that attend there will receive a high quality of education. There will be improvements made. There will be new classrooms. There will be a new gymnasium. That is out of a sense of fairness. So I can tell you that my community, many of them have said, what can we do with our $155? I know what I'm doing with mine. I won't speak for other members of my community, but I want you to know that the librarian at Sir John A. Macdonald High School, that legendary librarian, Grace Rogers, she'll receive a $155 check endorsed by this member, because that high school and that library has been neglected for far, far, far too long. And those changes must be made. Those changes must be made, and those dollars must be correctly spent in an appropriate fashion to maintain a quality high school in a growing community, Mr. Chair. Now, Mr. Chair, there are 3 portable classrooms in back of Sir John A. 3 portable classrooms. And Mr. Chair, we are looking at a fact of a growing community that goes from exit 3 to 5, that is, I must say, to the Minister of Highways compliment, that highways, that the 103 is being twinned from 3 to 5. It has to be. But that growth is because of the fact that many young couples have moved into the constituency that I'm fortunate enough to represent. And Mr. Chair, it's not a biological fact, it's an historical fact. Young couples have children. Children go to schools. You don't have to be Einstein to know that planning has to be in place when it comes to the school system across this province. Mr. Chair, we have always been playing catch-up when it comes to schools. We have always been playing catch-up when it comes to schools in the community of Timberlea Prospect. And it's inexcusable. And the community's not going to put up with it anymore. Because there has to be a clear identification that when a developer comes into a community, the developer, and you know from your municipal experience, Mr. Chair, the developer comes in, builds the houses, gives no support for recreation, gives no support for the local arena, and more importantly, Mr. Chair, really does nothing when it comes to the fact of education and the fact that schools are more and more crowded because of the houses that have been built. Now, there are some exceptions, Mr. Chair. There are some exceptions when it comes to developers. And I'm going to move to that point now, if I may, because I know that when it comes to education, I can talk at length on the concerns and frustrations of my community. Mr. Chair, I want to talk about one particular developer. And that developer is Cameron Sleep. Now, Mr. Sleep, of course, of the wonderful family of Murray Sleep and family, Mr. Sleep Murray, that is, of course, was involved for so many years with the Boxing Commission, and he was recognized and a Nova Scotian of great merit during his days in our province. Cameron Sleep is, after all, a developer with a conscience. But Mr. Sleep has received numerous complaints lately about the roads in his growing subdivision. And I want to talk about that subdivision for just a moment, if I may, Mr. Chair. That is the subdivision of Halliburton Hills and Halliburton Heights. It's located in the growing community of Stillwater Lake. Mr. Chair, are you aware of the fact that there are almost 750 homes in that subdivision? 750 homes. But Mr. Chair, Haliburton Hills is outside of the urban core. Now, you know what that means, but I wonder if members opposite are aware of what that means. We're all part of the HRM, but then there's the urban core, and then there's the other part of the municipality. There's the rural, there's the suburban part. So let me tell you the frustrations that Mr. Sleep and the people who live in Haliburton Hills have had to put up with. The first part of Haliburton Hills is paved. But when you move into this expansive subdivision, you then begin to go through a number of infamous streets. And they're all named after British hit tunes, incidentally. I'm sure Mr. Sleep must have been a Beatles fan. There's Penny Lane, there's Bristol Avenue, there is Abbey Road. And let me tell you, Mr. Chair, if you come in and go down Buckingham, which is another one of the streets in this expansive subdivision, Buckingham is paved until it comes to Abbey Road. And then you're on gravel. But Mr. Chair, if your truck can handle it, and if you continue to move along up through Abbey Road, you will come to the new paved section of that expanding subdivision. Now, there are people who live in that subdivision that I hear from regularly, Mr. Chair. And you know what they say to me? Bill, tell them to keep that $155 and use it so that subdivision roads, under the cost-sharing arrangement with the HRM, we can get our roads paved. Mr. Chair, that's an example of responsible Nova Scotians who are not in any way going to be impressed by this $155 check. They would rather have it used in a place where they could see the results. A paved road, a safe road, a road, Mr. Chair, where the school bus doesn't get stuck. A road where the fire truck can get in or out. A road that you would look at, Mr. Chair, and I've used the example of Jim McMullen before. Jim, the airplane pilot, Jim, who arrives back in the middle of the night from a flight overseas, and he can get from the airport home in the middle of the winter because the roads are plowed. But when he comes up Buckingham and begins to make the road up Abbey, he can't go any further. He can't go any further. He lives on Bingham, incidentally, Mr. Chair. Now, how is Mr. McMullen to explain, you know, I'm this far, Kathy, that's his wife, I'm this far, but I got to leave the vehicle right where it is. I hope the plow sees it when I come home. Now, I know members opposite can get very quickly involved into that we and them, that rural versus urban. Very quickly, I'll hear from members opposite who say, the Halifax Regional Municipality gets everything. Well, let me tell you, amalgamation that was brought in by the members of that group over there in a previous administration, that amalgamation has not helped the people of Haliburton Hills. It has not helped the people of McDonald Lake Subdivision. It has not helped the people along the Eastern Shore because of the concern of that different level of service. The different level of service is best exemplified when it comes to snow removal, when it comes to road repairs. And Mr. Chair, I will tell you, there are people throughout the constituency of Timberley Prospect who can tell this government where to put that $155. And I don't mean in that sort of tone. Well, they'll take that $155 and donate it to the library at Sir John A. Or donate it, after all, to, if they could, the suburban cost-sharing formula when it comes to the maintenance of roads in the growing community of Timberley Prospect. Now, Mr. Chair, I have many more comments to make, and I don't want to take all the time of the House tonight. I want you to know, however, the concern that I could bring forth most opportune is that I'd like to draw a reference to a famous, and I used it so many times during minority government, when I read in the Truro Daily News from April 5th, 1999, province falling down on road repairs. says MLA. And I know I shouldn't have a prop. Who was that? And I want you to know about, I want you to know. Because first of all, the MLA has the byline Stewiacke. And the member from beautiful Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley said, and he is quoted in this article, a progressive conservative policy on highway improvements calls for all money generated either through provincial gasoline taxes or registry of motor vehicle revenues to be spent on our highway system. April 1999. He goes on to say, this proposal would result in approximately $255 million being spent on our highway system across Nova Scotia annually, significantly more than what is presently budgeted for highway infrastructure. This is the same member. This is the same member that used to, when in opposition, not one teaspoon, or was it tablespoon? Not one teaspoon of asphalt has been in this riding. Now I have him on the opposite side. And I see a common sense approach that when he was in opposition, when the member from Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley said, take the revenues from the gasoline tax, the revenues from the registry of motor vehicles, take that and use that and put it directly on roads. That was a good idea. Now, the member from Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley, you had a good idea when you sat on this side of the House. You've moved over there, and I haven't heard that idea since. The good idea, an idea based upon common sense, Mr. Chair, an idea up in smoke, because that idea, it seems, has been forgotten, because the MLA from Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley, for one reason or another, seems to have forgotten that once he got in government, good ideas don't just stay in opposition. You take them when you have the opportunity to go over there. Mr. Chair, there is one more issue that I wish to bring to your attention in the short time that I have remaining. And that, of course, is the fact, the litmus test for this government and this particular piece of legislation, Bill 36, will be on the doorstep. That's right. It'll be on the doorstep. And what are we hearing from Nova Scotians? We're hearing about insurance rates through the roof. And I don't want to even begin to refer them because I'd have to table them. But here are the ones that I received today. I'm now up to 380 responses from the people of Timberley Prospect. There's an example of good use of funds, good use of government dollars that could be used to, after all, take a proactive step when it comes to the issue of insurance rates. And that, after all, Mr. Chair, is an issue that members opposite are going to hear on the doorstep. They're going to hear it on the doorstep time after time after time. They're also going to hear about issues about long-term care. They're going to hear about issues about tuition. They are going to hear from Nova Scotians of all ages, whether they're university students, high school students going on to university. They're going to hear from seniors. They are going to hear from drivers who are angry, Mr. Chair. So if you think, as a government member, you can take that Bill 36, you can take that piece of legislation out there, and when the election writ is dropped, and say, look at the good job we've done. Look what we've done for you. We've done all these things. I will tell you, Mr. Chair, you are going to have, and government members opposite are going to have a lot of doors slammed in their face. A lot of doors that are going to be suddenly slammed shut because they aren't overly concerned about that $155. They're concerned that their government is working for them to assist them with insurance rates, to assist their children when it comes to tuition fees, to assist them when it comes to helping out their parents and their grandparents when it comes to long-term care, to assist them make sure that they have a safe road to drive on, that they have schools that are environmentally friendly, or that if they have children in the school system, that they have the appropriate dollars in place. That, Mr. Chair, is the litmus test of this piece of legislation. I look forward to taking it to the doorsteps of Timberley Prospect, and when the time comes, I look forward to returning to this House with that verdict from those people.
I'd like to thank the member for the comments. I'd like to recognize the member from NDP Caucus, Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, time being 7:42. Closure be 8 o'clock.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to have a few moments this evening before the hour of adjournment to talk about Bill number 36. We're in committee of the whole House. This is an opportunity right now to talk about the title of the bill, to talk about some of the broader issues around the bill and what particularly we want to talk about. And so people understand, we're talking about the Financial Measures Act, which is the second component of a budget. The budget with the line-by-line details of how much money the government is spending was passed a few weeks ago by the government, and now we're dealing with the legislative changes that are required in order to pass, to also finalize the budget. And that includes two components that I particularly want to talk about, Mr. Speaker. The first one is the $155 check that this government has decided to issue to some Nova Scotians. Oh, yeah. They have arbitrarily decided that some Nova Scotians will get this check, while almost an equal number will not. Yeah, it's 438,000. I think my friend from Timberley Prospect, 438,000, Mr. Speaker, will be getting a check because they paid the Nova Scotia income tax.
300,000 more.
And there are 300,000 people who will not be getting the check because they do not pay Nova Scotia income tax. And then maybe to clarify for the record, Mr. Speaker, that's not to say they don't pay taxes, because they do. And first of all, they may even actually pay income tax. They may pay the federal income tax. And this may be new to a lot of people, because it's not that long ago, Mr. Speaker, that we had one income tax system. I recall for years you would file your form, you would find out how much your federal tax was, and your provincial tax was a percentage of the federal tax. And it would be calculated on those lines, and you would pay that percentage. Well, Mr. Speaker, now that isn't the case anymore. It's called decoupling. A few years ago, I think it was actually this Minister of Finance who decided we would, or maybe it was the one before, decided to split away, as many provinces have, and created our own Income Tax Act, which basically mirrors the federal act, but it also gives us an opportunity to make some of the changes that we wish. It also means instead of our taxes being a percentage of the federal tax, we have our own tax rate now. And so we decide who pays and who doesn't. We decide who gets rebates and who doesn't. And that is the system we have in place. Now we're able to do this because Revenue Canada continues through an agreement to help the province with regard to collection of the taxes, Mr. Speaker. But we're in a position right now where this government decided that they would give a tax cut to those who pay Nova Scotia income tax. That's 438,000 Nova Scotians. As I said a little earlier, there are 300,000 Nova Scotians who do not pay the Nova Scotia income tax. They may pay the federal income tax, some of them, but none of them pay the Nova Scotia income tax, and they will not be getting a check. Now, of course, who are these people? These are the poorest of the Nova Scotians, hardworking Nova Scotians who are scratching out a living and the jobs that they do, Mr. Speaker, and they will not be getting that rebate check, which is really quite ironic because you hear the Premier of this province, when he gets up in question period, talk about the fact that the whole point of this check is not just to give money back to the Nova Scotians, but so they'll be investing it in Nova Scotia. That they'll be able to take that money and put it into buying things or spending it on certain things that will then result in that money being churned through the economy and creating more jobs in Nova Scotia. My biggest problem with that, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that the people who are most likely to spend a $155 check are the ones who need the $155 check the most. Those who maybe work part-time, those who work for lower wages. Mr. Speaker, those are the people that are most likely to use that money to go out and buy something, either some sort of appliance or good that they need, or at least spend it on something that they definitely require, Mr. Speaker. Yet those people aren't going to get that check. They will not receive that check. They will not receive $1 from this government. And Mr. Speaker, that is a concern that I have with the components of this bill that this government is proposing with regard to the $155. Here's the other major problem, and as a member from Timberley Prospect said, and I agree, I look forward to going on the doorstep and talking to Nova Scotians, because 40% of the Nova Scotians are people from my riding, Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, that I'm going to talk to. I'm going to knock on the door and I'm going to say, did you get a check? And 40% of the people are going to say, no. What check? I didn't get a check. And right then, I'm going to be able to explain to them why they did not get a check. And you know what? They're not going to be very happy with this government, I suggest.
Where can you put the sign, Kevin?
But let's add on to that, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, even if they do get a check, even if they are going to be involved in the tax cut, 10% tax cut starting in January of 2004, it's pretty easy math to explain to them what benefit they're getting from a tax cut and how much they're paying in extra taxes and extra fees from this government. Over $200 million annually
this government has increased fees and taxes on the people of Nova Scotia. And yet now they try and claim they're giving people a tax cut by cutting taxes $130 or $140 million. Well, my math means that Nova Scotians are paying $70 million more in taxes to this government since this government came into power than they're going to get back in a tax cut. I'll even make it simpler. When I knock on a door during this next election, Mr. Speaker, I'll be able to say, is your house heated with oil, electricity? Let's talk about that. If you have an oil furnace, if you want to fill your oil tank to heat for the winter, that's going to be approximately, I think, $60 to $80 or $90 each tank. You're going to be paying in HST alone. $60 to $80 in HST alone, Mr. Speaker. Want to talk about your insurance rates going up? HST slapped on that as well. So for every $100 of extra insurance you have to pay, if your insurance rate goes up $100, that's an extra $15. If your insurance rate goes up $400, that's an extra $60 in HST you're going to be paying each year just for the services being provided. Now, what if your house is heated with electricity, Mr. Speaker? Well, if your house, Mr. Chair, if your house is heated with electricity, it's going to probably be about $30, $35 every bill you're going to be paying in HST. Something as simple as filling up a tank of gas in the car is probably $4 or $5 in HST. That's on top of the road tax. That's on top of the fuel taxes that we impose on Nova Scotians. As the member from Timberley Prospect pointed out, the member from Colchester Musquodoboit Valley, and I believe it's also in the Blue Book, said we will take every dollar of the road tax, of driver registration, and we will put gasoline tax, and we will put that on paving roads in Nova Scotia. Well, you know what? I remember being the finance critic a couple of years ago, and I specifically remember that was not done by this government. I don't even know if they've hit 50%. I think it's over $200 million is raised in that tax. And yet this government doesn't spend $100 million on road repairs and new roads in Nova Scotia. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's another reason why Nova Scotians are going to want to talk to us on the doorstep about this budget, about this Financial Measures Act, and that's a concern that I have, and I'm glad to talk to the constituents of Cole Harbour Eastern Passage about it, Mr. Speaker. So my point is that if you are getting that tax cut, not the $155 check, that's one component, but even next year, if you make $40,000 a year, Mr. Speaker, that's $10 every paycheck you're going to get extra from the tax cut. Well, every time you fill up your car with a tank of gas, and presumably you're going to fill it up once a week anyway, so there goes your tax cut. On 2 tanks of gas, you're going to pay in HST. Every time you fill up your house with oil for purposes of running your oil furnace to heat your house in the winter, $60 to $80 in HST each time. Or if it's electricity, $30 on each bill. Well, Mr. Speaker, it adds up pretty quickly, and the math isn't very difficult. You will see that you're spending a lot more in HST on the essentials of life than you're getting back in a tax cut from this government. And that's what our party's been saying from the beginning, Mr. Speaker. This is not about tax cuts. It's about giving a break to Nova Scotian families who deserve it the most. Yep. And the irony of this is that this government is providing a tax cut to some Nova Scotians, but not to all Nova Scotians. And on top of that, what Nova Scotians truly deserve is a tax cut, is a break on the rates of HST and taxes they're paying on fuel oil for their house, gasoline for their car, children's medication, children's clothing, electricity. That's what they need to ensure that they are able to live the life that they want in Nova Scotia and know that the cost of living will not go up or will at least go down in some way. That's what can happen. We can also talk about reducing auto insurance rates, and in doing that, we're reducing the HST on those rates, Mr. Speaker. These are the things Nova Scotians want. And Mr. Speaker, the problem is that this government doesn't seem to understand that. They don't seem to understand that Nova Scotians are looking for a real break. And writing a check and hoping that the check arrives just in time for the election will convince them that it's the right time to vote Tory. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it'll work in Cole Harbour Eastern Passage. I don't think it'll work in Cape Breton Centre. I don't think it'll work in Dartmouth East. I don't think it'll work in any of the ridings. And I think, quite frankly, that this government is starting to realize that as well. You know, when we came into this House in March, the talk was there'd be an election in May. Bring her on. Bring her on. We're very eager to get out there and talk to Nova Scotians about it. After that budget, you know what?
Didn't bounce.
I don't think it's selling. That check to the Nova Scotians is not working. Nova Scotians didn't want to hear it. That's not what they want to hear from their government. They're a little more sophisticated than that, Mr. Speaker. And I wish this government given the people of Nova Scotia credit to believe that they are more sophisticated than that, but they're not. And now they're starting to realize they better delay the election. At this rate, it'll be June 27th, 2004 before we hold our election, which will be the 5-year deadline, Mr. Speaker, because this government's beginning to realize that they made a mistake. They made a mistake in thinking that Nova Scotians thought this would be a good news budget, when in fact it was not, and a $155 check is not going to sell Nova Scotians on voting Tory. Well, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of things that can be done with that money. I talked about reducing HST on the essentials of life. That's one of the things our party's been talking about. I want to take a page from my colleague from Timberley Prospect and talk about some of the specific issues that can be addressed with $155 checks, Mr. Speaker, in my riding. I think about going to Caldwell Road Elementary School in Cole Harbour and seeing the condition of the grounds in that school. Now, that's an older school, Mr. Speaker. That's been around going back to the 60s or maybe even the late 50s. It was probably the first elementary school in Cole Harbour, at least one of the first modern ones. And Mr. Speaker, they have a ground that is in bad shape. And they have been talking about wanting that fixed for a long time. They've got major potholes on the road. They need their driveway repaved. There's safety issues. This isn't just a matter of convenience. These are safety issues. You have children coming out of the door of the school, walking directly onto a circle driveway where the buses come around and where there are a lot of cars parking. And they've demanded, they've asked, they've requested the school board, they've requested the provincial government to look at ways of trying to fund some means of addressing that to improve the grounds, to make them safer, to make them okay for the kids to play. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's been ignored for years. And Mr. Speaker, that is the concern that a lot of people in my riding have. And you know what? Those $155 checks that they're getting could probably go towards improving those grounds at that school. And Caldwell Road Elementary would be a better school. The kids would be safer. They'd probably be better educated in the long run. And Mr. Speaker, you know what? This government ignored that problem and instead decided that writing a check to a few Nova Scotians would be better use of the money. I think about the same issue at Astor Drive Elementary, another elementary school in my riding, where they also have issues with grounds, particularly the issue of flooding and the water. They're almost in a valley, a small valley. And the problem is that when it rains, all the water comes down and fills up, Mr. Speaker. Bad drainage. They're looking for a new playground equipment. Well, Mr. Speaker, all these issues could have been addressed. Instead of issuing $155 checks to some Nova Scotians, that money could have gone towards things in my community, Mr. Speaker, that would have ensured those schools are better, that the students are better prepared for learning, that the communities are safer. Yet we don't see that. Instead, we see a government that's turned its back on Nova Scotians, turned its back on what Nova Scotians truly want. They've said from day one, poll after poll after poll said, tax cut is not a priority. Deal with health care, deal with our education system. More recently, we've heard them say, deal with long-term care in Nova Scotia. Stop gouging seniors and taking money away from them that should be going into, that they should be able to get medical care, the same as every other Nova Scotian, covered. Deal with auto insurance. Deal with the skyrocketing rates of auto insurance, Mr. Speaker, and how Nova Scotians are dramatically affected by that. That's all the Nova Scotians have been saying. Tax cut was way down on the list. Yet this government decided, because of some promise in 1999 in a blue book, written by some backroom Tories in some room in Halifax, that that's what they needed. Well, the problem is that keeping promises are not just about keeping promises for promises' sake. It's about delivering to Nova Scotians real breaks to allow them to be able to live their lives. Most Nova Scotians think about government to provide the services they want. Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. Well, at the same time, they want to know, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, they want to know that the government is going to allow them to live their lives the way they wish. And that means providing them with the breaks they deserve to be able to ensure that they can live in their homes, they can heat their houses, they can get electricity, they can afford auto insurance, they can put fuel in the car, they can drive a car with decent insurance. That's what Nova Scotians want, and this government has failed to deliver that for them, Mr. Speaker. And that is why Bill number 36 is going to be a downfall of this government in the long run, Mr. Speaker. But I see my time is ending, so I'll move adjournment of the debate in Committee of the Whole on Bill number 36.
I'd like to thank the member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, for his comment. He's moved adjournment. And now I would like to recognize the Government House Leader.
I move that your committees now rise and report progress.
Hearing that, so moved.
Sir. Chairman on the Committee of the Whole House of Supply reports. On Bill's reports.
Is met, made progress, begs leave to sit again.
Agreed? The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House to now rise to meet again tomorrow at the hour of 2 p.m. The House will sit till 6 p.m. and the Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre will advise us of the business for tomorrow.
The Honourable Assistant to the House Leader for the New Democratic Party.
The assistant. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow we will be calling for opposition business Resolution 1323 and Bill number 30.
Motion the House adjourns tomorrow at 2 p.m. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary minded nay. Motion is carried. The House adjourns at 2 p.m.